Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Mm,
Today, we're digging into a really pivotal decade in American history,
mm,
the 1920s.
that's right.
We often think jazz, maybe prohibition, right? But what really supercharged the Roaring Twenties was this, well, massive shift in technology and communication.
Mm-hmm.
We're going into your source material to explore how all that innovation
hmm
actually led to better living standards, incredible mobility, and totally new ways for people to connect
hmm
and sell things.
Yeah, it's such a critical moment because the whole economic engine of the U.S. just shifted gears.
How so?
Well, the focus swung really sharply towards mass-producing consumer goods, and that, in turn, kind of forged a new national culture.
Okay.
But the key thing, and the sources really emphasize this, is the paradox. This huge economic boom made stuff accessible, sure, but it also sort of widened the existing gaps in society, social, racial, regional divide.
Right, that cause and effect, how innovation on the factory floor ripples out and reshapes culture. That's the thread we want to pull today.
Exactly.
So we'll trace it, starting with how things were made, then look at what people bought, and finally, how this new culture got shared everywhere.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's begin right at the source of all that prosperity. The boom in the 20s. It wasn't just luck, was it? It really came down to these, well, revolutionary changes in manufacturing. Efficiency, output.
Mm.
It just exploded.
Absolutely. It made goods cheaper and faster than really anyone could have imagined previously.
And the cornerstone of that was Henry Ford, right, with the moving assembly line.
Yes, his perfection of it. He'd started implementing it around 1913, but by the 20s, it was really the benchmark, the gold standard for how you made things efficiently.
And it wasn't just, putting things on a belt. The key was simplifying the work itself.
Precisely. The car moved, the worker stayed put, doing one single repetitive thing, like tightening the same bolt, installing the same handle again and again,
Super specialized.
which maximized speed, consistency, but the impact. It was revolutionary. It cut the time to build a Model T from, 12 hours down to maybe 90 minutes? 90 minutes. That's incredible.
It is. And suddenly, the Model T wasn't just for the wealthy. Millions could afford it. It genuinely democratized owning a car.
And just like that, the old way, the craft way, where one person built the whole thing,
Gone. Obsolete. Couldn't compete on price or speed.
it also must have completely changed the workforce.
Oh, fundamentally, you didn't need as many highly skilled artisans, but you needed legions of factory workers. So it opened up massive opportunities for unskilled labor, people pouring into the cities for these jobs.
Okay, so Ford's assembly line is the practical side. But there was a theoretical side too, wasn't there? Taylorism.
Exactly. You can't really talk about Fordism without mentioning scientific management or Taylorism. That's Frederick W. Taylor.
He gave it the intellectual framework, moving it from guesswork to, science.
Meticulous science.
Yeah.
Taylor would literally time and analyze every single motion a worker made, breaking jobs down into tiny parts to find the one most efficient way, eliminating every wasted second, every unnecessary movement.
Sounds intense, maybe a little exhausting for the workers. Exhausting, yes, but incredibly effective for productivity. This systematic approach, it spread way beyond just cars.
So they worked hand in hand.
You could say that. Ford perfected the machines, Taylor perfected the human element running them. The result, this sudden, huge flood of affordable stuff onto the market.
Which creates a whole new problem, or maybe opportunity, once you can make millions of things efficiently.
How do you get millions of people to buy them?
Exactly. And that's the pivot. Manufacturing efficiency leads straight into mass consumption.
And the symbol of that entire era has to be the car.
Without a doubt. The automobile. It just screamed modernity, freedom, American industrial power.
The numbers are pretty wild. Sources say by the end of the 20s, Americans own something like 80% of all the cars in the world.
That's right, 80%.
Yeah.
Think about what that does to a society. It wasn't just transportation, it reshaped life itself.
How so?
Well, personal freedom, obviously. Unprecedented mobility. You weren't tied to train schedules or streetcar lines anymore. You could go where you wanted, when you wanted, live further from work. Which basically invents the suburbs, doesn't it?
It's the driving force, absolutely. People could move out of the crowded cities, get more space, a yard, privacy, but still commute in for their jobs.
And the cities themselves had to change.
Radically. Places like LA, Houston, they grew around the car. You needed paved roads everywhere, highways, gas stations popping up on every corner. It wasn't just a product. It was an entire ecosystem.
Okay, so cars are huge. But it wasn't just cars. There was this explosion of other goods, too. often bought on credit.
Oh, absolutely. Toasters, refrigerators, radios, vacuum cleaners, beauty products, you name it. Mass production made it all possible, and installment plans made it attainable.
And selling all this new stuff required a new approach, too.
Yes, and this might be the biggest cultural shift of the decade. The birth of modern psychological advertising.
Explain that, because before, ads were mostly just, here's the product, here's the price.
Pretty much. Feature-focused, utilitarian. But once everyone's making cheap toasters, how do you stand out?
Good point.
Advertisers started borrowing ideas from psychoanalysis, like from Sigmund Freud. They realized they had to appeal to something deeper than just practicality. They started targeting emotions, aspirations, even insecurities.
So instead of, our vacuum is powerful, it's more like, a clean home shows you care about your family, buy this vacuum.
Exactly like that. It completely changed the game. The key takeaway, I think, from the sources here is that advertising started linking ownership with your identity, your status. Your self-worth became tied to what you consumed.
Weaponizing keeping up with the Joneses, essentially.
Pretty much, using status anxiety to drive sales.
And wow, you can definitely still see the echoes of that today, a century later.
No question. And to get these powerful new messages out, you needed powerful new communication tools, which were also exploding in the 20s.
Right, these technologies redefined entertainment, news, everything. They helped create that shared national culture advertisers needed.
And the big one there was radio.
Its growth was just phenomenal, wasn't it? Something like 600 stations by 1923.
Yeah, nearly 600 licensed broadcasters. It was chaotic at first.
But then it consolidated.
Quickly. NBC forming in 1926 was huge. The first national network. Think about that. Suddenly, people in California, Maine, and Kansas could all be listening to the exact same program, the same news report, the same music at the same time.
That's a powerful unifying force, creating a kind of national conversation.
It really was the original water cooler effect, maybe, but it also, immediately reflected the culture's blind spots and biases.
Like with shows such as Amos and Andy.
Exactly. Hugely popular, but built entirely on reinforcing harmful racial stereotypes. So, unity and division right there.
And alongside radio, you have cinema becoming massive.
Just huge. By the end of the decade, something like 3/4 of Americans were going to the movies every single week. It was the place for shared stories, glamour, national myths.
And the cinema had its own tech revolution. Silent films were on their way out.
Absolutely. 1927, The Jazz Singer. Synchronized sound arrives. The talkies. It basically ended the silent era overnight.
Which must have made movies even more influential.
Oh, definitely. Now you had dialogue, music integrated directly. Movies could spread trends, slang, songs, social attitudes even faster and more effectively across the country.
What's interesting, too, is how these new media, sometimes platformed voices, they were usually marginalized, like with phonograph records.
That's a great point. Labels like Black Swan Records made a conscious effort to record and distribute music by African-American artists.
Bringing jazz and blues to a much wider audience.
Precisely. Taking regional music and making it national, integrating it into the mainstream soundscape.
And you saw similar things with specialized radio programming, too.
Yeah. Pioneers like Jack L. Cooper creating Black radio shows for Black audiences. And down south, you had stations like WSM broadcasting the Grand Ole Opry, taking country music and Southern culture way beyond its regional roots.
So the media was both centralizing culture and giving space for specific regional or group identities.
Which brings us right back to that central paradox of the 1920s. These forces pushing towards unity were also simultaneously highlighting and sometimes worsening divisions.
Okay, let's unpack that. On one side, you have national radio, Hollywood movies, coast-to-coast advertising, creating this shared sense of being American.
Right. People everywhere consuming the same stuff, hearing the same jokes, tapping their feet to the same music, a common cultural vocabulary. But the very nature of that mainstream, who controlled it, meant it often excluded or really distorted the experiences of minority groups.
Particularly racial and ethnic minorities.
Yes. And that exclusion or misrepresentation, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It actually provoked responses.
Like the Harlem Renaissance.
A perfect example. It was this incredible flowering of Black artistic and cultural expression, partly as a way to assert an authentic identity against those mainstream distortions.
And you also see the divide between city and country getting sharper.
Massively amplified by media, films almost always showed city life as glamorous, modern, exciting, which, if you were living in rural America, could make you feel, well, left behind.
highlighting those cultural and economic gaps.
Exactly. It reinforced those separate identities, rural versus urban, and fueled a sense of anxiety among people in more traditional communities.
And that anxiety ties into the broader cultural conflicts of the era.
Absolutely. You had traditionalists genuinely fearing that all this modern stuff, consumerism, the new media, changing social norms, was eroding morality, tearing apart the community fabric.
It wasn't just a small thing, it fueled major battles.
Big ones. The Scopes trial over evolution, the fights over immigration restriction, prohibition itself. A lot of that energy came from this feeling that the modern world, broadcast right into your living room, was a threat.
So the factory makes the car, the advertiser sells you an identity tied to the car, and the radio tells you all about this new, maybe scary modern world.
That's a pretty good summary. Synthesizing the sources, the 1920s really show this clear chain reaction. Technology shifts Fordism, Taylorism create this incredible efficiency.
Which then demands cultural shifts.
Right. It necessitates things like psychological advertising and mass media to move all the goods and shape consumer desire. The factory's efficiency basically created a new way to define yourself through what you owned.
Okay, so wrapping this up for you, our listener, we've tracked how mass production made things like cars affordable, giving millions incredible freedom and mobility. We saw how new media like radio and film forged a shared national culture, for better and worse. But maybe the stickiest legacy is that shift in selling. Advertising moving from describing what a product does to defining who you are if you own it, appealing to your emotions, your status, your identity.
It was a profound change.
So, the source material highlights how advertising successfully linked ownership with identity back then. Here's a final thought to take away. How much of our modern identity, think about your online persona, the brands you choose, and frankly, how much of our modern debt is still built on those very same psychological sales tactics pioneered 100 years ago in the Roaring '20s? Is the ghost of the assembly line still shaping how you see yourself today? Something to think about.